joining us in the latest in our series of AHIC Insight webinars. It's been a while since we last met, but we are conscious that in addition to the COVID pandemic, there has been a bit of a pandemic of webinars and online content. So we want to ensure that we only bring you content which is quality and is going to be insightful and helpful for your business. So I'm delighted today to be able to share with you the HVS Investor Insights survey results. And it's going to be led by Hala Matar Shafani, a lady who needs no introduction in this industry. If you don't know who she is, then you seriously need to check your industry knowledge. She's going to be heading up a fabulous panel with Hassan and Anil and Scott. Hassan and Anil are two also very prominent hotel owners, Hassan in Saudi and Anil here in the UAE. And then Scott is a legal eagle who will bring his perspective to the conversation as well. So without further ado, I will let Hala take over. I just will remind you that there's a Q&A button down below that you guys can put in your questions. And we will try, Hala will, if time allowing, hope to get to all the questions. And we will also be sending you the slides afterwards. So I will now leave you in Hala's capable hands. Enjoy, and I'll see you at the end.
Thank you, Jennifer. I mean, you've actually left me speechless, but I'm very happy to be here today, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone, and for taking the time to join us to the Owner and Investor AHIC HVS. I wouldn't want to call it webinar. This is going to be a friendly chat with three individuals who, I'm not exaggerating, collectively have over 100 years of experience in this sector, and specifically in the GCC. They represent also combined more than 30 hotels in this market. And with them, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the HVS owner and investor findings, but more importantly, is to look at what their real and actual challenges are at the moment and how they're looking to reopen, to reassess the market opportunities, what their recovery model would look like, and how are the different stakeholders in the market supporting them and potentially we're required to support them. The focus is going to be on what they have to tell us. The report itself is available on the HVS website, will be also distributed. So I'm very excited to be talking to the panelists this afternoon across a number of topics. So if I could welcome them individually and just share with you my experience with each one of them. And if I could start with introducing Anil, Director of Hospitality at Al Musa. I think Anil and I met many years ago, I mean, probably 13 years ago when we first met in 2007. And I've always looked up to Anil, and I was always very impressed, not just that he's seen the rise and fall, and again, the rise of this sector, but more importantly, in his forward thinking and really highlighting challenges or potentially trends ahead of anyone else. His contribution to AHIC has been great, but also his contribution to this sector is something we can all learn from. We also have with us Scott from BLP. Scott and I have also on a number of occasions discussed hotel owners' contracts and the changes and the challenges and the trends, but definitely while he wears different hats, sometimes on the owner side, but also on the operator side, he's definitely someone who has made win-win deals. And I've very much learned from Scott and enjoyed also looking at how these contracts are changing with time. And perhaps we will be talking further as post-COVID, how these contracts may even be impacted further. And last but not least, I'm very pleased to be able to bring into this discussion from KSA, Hassan Adhab. Hassan, the CEO of Hospitality for Dur. Dur, who have in 2019 also expanded and acquired a large stake into Shada, which is a homegrown brand. They have around 20 hotels owned, managed, operated in the pipeline. They have their own brand, but they also have hotels under the management agreements with Marriott, IHG, and Hilton. I'm very pleased again, and we're going to go straight now to looking at what are the areas that we're going to be exploring with the panelists over the next 45 minutes. If we could look at, yeah, we've got the slide there. So we would like to start off by looking at the actual operational challenges. and the what I call the reopenness readiness. Are we ready to reopen? Will we reopen? And if we're open, how are we surviving? We will move on also to look at the government support. Some has been already put forward, but do we need more? What is the operator and owner relationships at the moment? How can we improve it? And you know, as we're discussing this, definitely, what is the legality that will govern these discussions and the future dealings? And hopefully we will also be able to close off with recovery, development opportunities, and where do we see the future? So I'm just going to set the stage with a couple of graphs that from the HVS Hotel and Owner Survey. The sample is roughly 206 branded hotels across the region, and the region being specifically the GCC, the equivalent of 70,000 room keys. And, you know, I mean, they're quite telling. At the moment, we have 39% that are partially operational. What does that mean? Is it with reduced room count because of the current 30% capacity? Definitely, we know meeting space and the spa have been closed down permanently, and no signs of reopening anytime soon. But more importantly, there is roughly 30% of these hotels that have been totally closed down. And the challenges there, are we going to be able to reopen? And the ones that are only operational is 7%, which is quite a small number in the bigger scheme of things. Some of these hotels, and I know definitely Hassan, some of their properties, they have been transformed into quarantine facilities. And we will also try to understand more what, you know, was that a business that was really supportive to the sector? But more importantly, I think, what does that tell us in terms of liabilities? And this is what I want to hear from the panelists is, if 75% of hotel owners told us that they will only be able to meet their liabilities, and that relates definitely to staffing and the costs associated in running the day-to-day, whether closed or open, 75% can only meet it up to 6 months. What are the implications by year end? And what is going to be required for the future recovery? To conclude on the next slide with an additional 2 graphs when looking at, again, from an owner or investor side, you know, the hotel values, we've always been very keen to ensure that the operating model will result in an improvement and appreciation of the real estate asset. And as hotels are income producing asset, their values are defined by the income potential and EBITDA. So 39% of the respondents believe that it will take at least 18 months for EBITDA to return to normal. And an additional 39%, they're forecasted anywhere between 12 to 18 months. So combined, 80% of the respondents, they realize this is going to be long. It's going to be at least 12 to 18 months. And at the moment, as we speak, hotel values are likely sitting somewhere between 20 and 30% lower than end of 2019. I don't want to dwell on 2019, but we were already seeing a decline in values in 2019 of close to 25%. So there are serious issues here, and by acknowledging them, we can solve them. So with that, I'm just gonna pause here and go all the way to you, Hassan, in Riyadh, I'm assuming, and bring you into this conversation so we can start looking at how does that relate to the 20 odd hotels in your portfolio today? What were the challenges? Where are the opportunities? And how are you looking to reopening in the near future?
Thank you very much, Hala, for hosting me for this very important panel. Definitely we represent Dur Hospitality. Just for the clarity, I'm the president of hotel operation, not the CEO. Our CEO is Sultan Al-Ataibi. Hopefully he's with us also on this panel. It's very important matter for all of us. Speaking about our portfolio, yes, we own hotels, we operate hotels on behalf of other owners, and we have our own brand. And then we do franchise also with international operators. So we have all the panels and all the experiences for this one. Having said that, and going back to the challenges, I think if we go before the pandemic by 1 second, I think we all had, particularly in Saudi Arabia, but I believe it's all GCC areas, we had an extraordinary quarter 4 for 2019. And the beginning of 2020 was very, very promising. I would say, unfortunately, this pandemic came out of the blue, and end of March, the situation became really dark on all of us. And definitely from here, we started our challenges. From full house to zero revenue. So I think this is one element which we need to deal with. From, I would say, a full employment and how you're gonna deal with all your employees. And obviously our continuous running costs, which will become a challenge. How we recover this? I think we had to shut down certain hotels in Mecca, not just because of us, because Mecca is completely locked down. We had empty hotels here in Riyadh, but very likely we've been helped by the business coming back from the government for the quarantine areas. So some of our hotels have been selected, and then we regained business completely right away. And from this angle, I think we managed to continue protecting the employment part of it. The other element is because of the closure of certain hotels. I think we are no different from the others. We all went into a very serious contingency plan to limit the fat. So we negotiated with suppliers to reduce costs. We froze certain agreements. We had to really force certain vacation and annual leave for our people. Having said that, it's a normal measure which has been supported by everybody, kept us cruising and trying surviving this particular period, which I call it the remainder of the Q1, and basically until now, the end of Q2. So this is what we have done. From a business perspective, I think the world has mentioned that the pandemic will last a couple of 3 months, then the rebounds or return or post-pandemic will become more available and apparent. But my point of view here, we are coming to the end of June. And end of June, I don't think everybody sees the light at the end of the tunnel from a pandemic point of view. However, I think most of countries, companies, governments really looked into, okay, so what is after? The life need to go back to normal, so you can see the ease on the lockdown and the return to the economy progressively from opening the shops, malls, with definitely a serious restriction on hygiene. And this is where I call it, we are all adjusting now to the new norms, and the new norm is to be hygiene focused, but on the same time also trying to search for new opportunities. And the new opportunities, from my point of view, is we are now in the position of studying the new behavior for the corporation, okay, how the corporate business will react. We've all spent basically 3 months working from home, and we adjusted to the working from home, teleconferencing, like this one in particular. We spend more time at home, or family, you can call it this way. The most important one is social distancing and how we behave with the others. So we cannot just take this, whatever happened to us, in isolation. This will reflect also on our business behavior for the coming period. And having said that, all corporations may think of reducing office rent, okay, or space for their offices. Maybe they may offer to their employees certain part-time to work from home because everybody looks enjoying it. Our experience in our company, I tell you, the productivity during this period was extremely phenomenal. Everybody was fully engaged within our team. I think everybody was even giving more. I can call it almost the 24/7 available. Also, we are in the industry. I mentioned earlier, we had some hotels closed, some hotels not closed. Even for the closed hotels, we have our employees in the compounds. So we need to look, we have looked after them, we look after their safety, their hygiene. So we're really busy during this period, and the entire team fully engaged, and I'm amazed of it. And if they are listening to me, I say a big thank you to all of them on this one. So this is how we spent the period, but then adjusting to the new norms. There is one unknown element also for all of us, which is how the airline will react. We hear a lot of announcement on the airline coming back, new destination opening up, and a lot of measures have been taken into making the very safe by going to the airport a couple of hours before, etc. in the process. But Nobody reflected on the airfare, and this is a major element. On if the airfare is double or triple, this also reduce the travel pattern where we at the end, we are the recipient from a room's point of view, this will impact on the number of guest arrivals, etc. Another element which we need, it's in the unknown and we need to work on it, is the future of these big mega conferences. We have seen, the world has not stopped working, and all the big conferences, okay, whether it's governmental or different section and others, have been done virtually. So would this continue? And if this continue, there is a segment of MICE which need to be completely relooked at from A to Z point. So these are the challenges, if we're gonna just summarize and give the word to Anil to add on, but these are the kind of challenges which we have faced, we try to overcome, and we continue working on.
Thank you, Hassan. I mean, you've definitely raised a couple of points that I would like to follow up with some questions, but I'd like to hear from Anil with regards to the current operational challenges and their readiness for reopening. And then we can drill further into some of the points that you mentioned relating to travel, but also to the cost of reopening. So Anil, if I could come back locally here to the UAE, would you mind telling us more about the current status of your hotels? What has been the implications, and how are you looking at recovery? I mean, we have similar challenges here in terms of visibility for airport and tourism and arrivals anytime soon. So I'll leave it with you to talk us through it.
Well, thank you all. It's nice to, share my views on this very difficult subject. Actually, the elephant in the room here is, of course, God, nature, whatever you want to call it, who's really driving the agenda, frankly. And we are just trying to be as reactive or proactive as we can be. The UAE, actually, when you think about it, is handling it quite well. The number of cases in the last week or so have dramatically dropped. There's intensive testing going on. They have the advantage of a very small population base, very disciplined population base in a way. Initially there were some challenges, but the government quickly locked down certain local areas and then got it under control. So I think the UAE, in terms of its own internal challenges of the disease, will be ready, and they've already started, they've almost opened up everything now, barring the flights which they are talking about, certain restrictive ways of moving around. But that's literally changing by the day also. But having said that, in our industry, it's one thing, of course, to get yourself safe, your environment safe, which will, of course, attract visitors from wherever. But what is happening to the rest of the world from where the visitors are going to come, that's a different question. So, it's going to be, travel is like that. I mean, we can't just, our industry with the inventory we have in the UAE, with the population we have, the population mix, we obviously cannot generate domestic business enough to fill our 150 rooms, room bays, apartments, etc. So we are very dependent on incoming, and that is the unknown right now here. What have been the challenges in the last 3 months and the next 3 months till we are opening, etc.? I think this is something nobody was prepared. Let's be very honest. It is a level of problem that neither even management, forget management agreements, they cannot even address these kind of issues. But I would say that both the operator and owner from day one had one primary objective, and that was, as soon as they started realizing at the end of the 1 week that this is here to stay and will stay for a while, they didn't know how much, whether it would be a month, 2 or 3, but it certainly started becoming very soon 6 months and may go beyond. I think the reaction should have been a little different to what I, have felt. Their objective should have been, okay, let's try and get the bleeding to stop ASAP. This is very important, to get the bleeding to stop. There was going to be some bleeding for sure. Were they geared with the tools to do that? No. And I don't blame anyone, because something like this is completely unforeseen. Did they move with the speed which, whether they had the skill set to do it? I honestly don't know, because these are things which then have to be handled at their head offices so that it's spelled out to all their thousands of hotels all over the world. I mean, the first thing I said to everyone was, my accounting background, my finance background, I'm familiar with things like zero-based, etc., which is a fundamental principle that then starts coming into play. And you say to yourself, let's quickly draw up a template and send it across to everyone and say, here, gentlemen, we have to get to zero-based ASAP. Here is a template. And zero-based will literally mean you go to a lot of detail, examine each and every cost as if it starts from zero, and then build it up. But because of the uncertainty also of this problem, we had to have a lot of various permutations and combination built into that as sensitivity analysis. So there could be almost half a dozen of them, that if this happens, this is what you will do. If that happens, this is what you will do, kind of scenarios. Did the operators get to that as rapidly as you would have liked them? No, not really. But in due credit to them, they certainly handle, at least the operators that we deal with, handled their, the relationship with owners very proactively, communication, their own charges, their own fees, their whatever, they handled that, pretty actively. But that is a relatively smaller part of the story. The bigger story is the other big cost that, typically payroll, for example. We have special challenges in our region. Workers are 95% or more perhaps coming from abroad. If you get to terminate them, then it's a big job of getting them back, recruitment costs additional, etc., etc. Apart from that, the big spanner in the works is you cannot even send them back because the flights are cancelled. So you have to continue bearing the cost, and that's what's happening right now. We are continuing to bear the cost of even people we may have terminated, at least in terms of their lodging, their food, etc. That's humanity. That's something basic we need to do. Even their medical needs, they have to be taken care of. So this is the stage at which we are right now. Moving on to the next stage that's going to come, and it's already, I think, green shoots have started appearing, the reopening, or some of our properties which are already open. How do you scale them up, back and up? Again, here I would say the principle, we should stay with the principle that I enunciated right at the beginning. Stay as close as possible to break even. You cannot right now be too fussed with brand standards. I must have so many staff to so many rooms and all that. I mean, let's just hold that for a while. Guests will also have to be, obviously, they've been spoiled in the past, but this is reality right now. The only thing you will not compromise is life and safety. Sure, absolutely, because without that, nobody will come to you. So there may be some additional costs there that you take care of. But try and do the ramp up to match the revenues as they come in. I keep telling this to all people, and I hope somebody is listening out there.
Thank you, Anil. Again, I would like to spend a little bit more time talking about this relationship with the operator, but also the government support that you will be needing. But at this stage, how many of your hotels have actually closed down as we speak today?
Yeah, so I would say pure close down. 3 or 4 of the 12 or so. Okay.
Okay.
No, maybe five with our hotel apartments, etc. But there's parts of them have already started reopening. Okay, so
Okay.
F&B outlets have started opening because there's an F&B. We're feeling a demand has started, and one of them, of course, by the way, 2 of our properties are in Oman also, and one of them had the misfortune of being in the way of the cyclone we had recently. And so there was double whammy, but that's nature again asserting its powers. But there are others, some of them were mixed use, so we had long-term guests staying with them, so they stayed partially open. We are fortunate that a lot of our properties are resorts or right close to the water, and that I think will help us as we reopen because one of the points you mentioned earlier and which Hassan touched upon, the challenges that what will be the business model of traveling in the future. The way I look at it, business travel, I think, will diminish vis-a-vis as a percentage of total travel. Leisure will come back faster. As far as MICE goes, my view is the bigger events, sometimes you cannot do, you cannot get some of the bigger events on the net and all that. So there is a lot of one-to-one in those, and those will probably continue. But the smaller MICE event may suffer. But certainly business travel, will I believe for a while will, reduce. So properties which are on resorts or on the beach, etc., I think will have an advantage from that perspective.
Yeah, and I think we're all, we're all with agreement with what you just said, Anil. I mean, specifically in the UAE, there are many resort properties that were running with 100% occupancy on account of some people that decided to self-quarantine. I mean, these are the lucky ones, and they are the exceptions. But I would like now to specifically ask you as owners and bring Scott into this conversation as well. Who makes the decision to close down and who will make the decision to reopen? I mean, obviously operators may want their properties to be open, but that will also have cost implications. So the question here, how is that decision-making process governed? And are you looking to actually reopen all your properties and anytime soon?
Okay, so if I may jump in there before Scott gives us his legal standpoint. The good news here is that we did not need lawyers. I'm sorry to say that, Scott, but the owners and operators, at least the operators we dealt with, we realized that something like this, if we started getting into arguments about what the agreement is, what is the nature of this event, what does the management agreement say in this respect, we would have, had a real problem on our hands. We came to very amenable understandings, absolutely very clear. We said, let's revise the budget. Okay, let's look at the budget again. Whether we formally call it a budget, we don't know, because literally, I would call it more forecasts actually, because it was changing almost every second week. Okay, so we would, at least then both parties are aware what is the game plan going on here. There was much more increased interaction between the asset manager of the owner and the operator. I don't think, we really got into the legalities part of it. And as far as it seems right now, there doesn't seem to be any challenges. But yes, if you read strictly through the agreements, and Scott will tell us more about that, there are so many aspects about the agreement which could be worrisome for some owners. I think the operators themselves have been very, in our case certainly, have been proactive, like suspending their FF&E, suspending some of their other charges, etc., etc. Being very clear about certain things. There will be no audit requirement. You don't need to file this, that. You need, all those sort of things. They were proactive in that. So, these are the important things that they were handling, and that's good. This is where we need to be in the same boat. Really.
Absolutely. Scott, have you had any requests so far to come in to assist with these decision making, and especially in light of those hotel owners that for all the good reasons perhaps are unable to open anytime soon. Can you share with us a little bit more about management agreements and how they're dealing with these issues?
Well, fortunately, I haven't. I think one reason here is the operator and the owners are pretty much aligned in this pandemic, that the owner wants to save costs in closing early or not reopening. And the operator, if you're not having any turnover, there's not much reason to open in the first place. So there's a certain amount of alignment. Now, if there wasn't, and there was a dispute, I mean, generally, you have to look at the contract, but generally, the management contracts leave the decision to initially open the hotel, as well as to close or reopen after, say, let's say, a damage and destruction. That's an operator decision because they have been granted the authority to make decisions in the operation of the hotel. I think if an owner wanted to challenge that, they would probably be in breach of the contract, but they could do it because the operator is a contracted guest. Under common law, usually treated as an agent of the owner, and he can have contractual damages, but he can't keep his position in the hotel. So if the owner wanted to push it, he could, but they might have contractual damages. But I haven't seen this an issue because, as I said, both parties are aligned. An operator, based on the typical model of a fee based on revenues and GOP, isn't making any money if there's no turnover.
Scott, so on that point, I think, okay, so this is the last couple of months, and I realize that, we are all in the same boat, and definitely we've seen a lot of efforts from the operators in trying to take away some of the burdens on owners, and it's all been done in very positive and good intentions. Specifically today, I mean, operators have spent time really rolling out the new brand standards that relate to this pandemic, but also the health and safety regulations. And I'm sure Anil and Hassan will agree there's a cost implication to that. And the challenge is, do we follow through the government regulations? And the government have actually also been imposing and following up on these precautionary measures. And how does the brand standards requirement ties into this and the funding? Where do you see this is all impacting the relationship between the owner and the operator?
Well, the contract always requires, well, both parties are required to comply with the applicable laws of the operating country. So that's not for debate. Typically, your management contracts require that the owner fund any brand standard requirements, and particularly things that are fire, life, safety, or applicable law. This is going to be an additional cost. And again, I see a certain amount of alignment because to entice people back to the hotel, a big concern is going to be health and safety. And if you don't adopt some of these brand standards of the brand, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And arguably that the operator should be establishing very, very clear health and safety guidelines to market these hotels and get them open again. So again, I see a certain amount of alignment, but there's no question that the cost of running a property going forward is going to be higher. And then we have to look at compliance with brand standards on a broader sense. Some things make sense. If you need high-speed Wi-Fi, yes, or people won't come to the hotel. But what if it's an upgrade in your side of the bed telephone to, a digital thing? Do you really need that? Or is that something to be deferred? And I can see owners pushing back on those things, even though typically the contract says you must comply with brand standards, but hopefully there'll be some pragmatism on both sides there.
Sure. So Hassan and Anil, can I ask your views around this and brand standards that will be imposed by the operator, but also with regards to the government regulations concerning health and safety?
Okay, Hassan, you first.
Hassan, you need to unmute. Yeah.
I thought Nabil is going to do it from his end, so no problem. I think I'm fully aligned with what Scott mentioned here. I think first of all, we do need to look to where the customers, attention. I mentioned earlier that the new customer behavior will dictate basically every move in this industry going forward. And take it on all of us. We will not go to a place where we have even 1% doubt that it is not really clean from COVID-19 and alike. So I think all the operators, and we deal with all international operators in addition to our own brand. And we've been working very hard, like everyone else, on creating I would say, the trust for our future customers coming back. So it is indeed has a new cost for our operations. We need to find out where we mitigate it, with other things. I think the best thing which we'll be doing in the coming period, sitting down with the international operators and say, okay, we have this new cost imposed on all of us, whether it is, I would say, imposed by government, okay, and what is complemented by the operator if there is any addition to that. And that particular cost need to be mitigated and offset against something else, which is, as Scott mentioned, maybe less essential to the guest. Today, the guest look for hyper hygiene, okay, and really high-speed internet, and then maybe he will relinquish many other stuff which the operator was imposing on it. I believe that an open discussion will take place or should take place with the international operator to sign that the cost of the room, this is how it is, and we should not eat on the profitability of the room. We know that there are competition will remain in the marketplace from an ADR, so you cannot top it up to your ADR. So therefore, I think we need to absorb this in a way or another. So this is my opinion on that particular new brand standard. Now, that's it.
It's interesting you speak about the ADR, Hassan, and that's one thing I wanted to talk about also earlier on when you mentioned about the cost of airfare. It's tricky because, we are also hoping that operators will not put up the price because of the price sensitivity as well of these travelers. We'd have less people traveling and they cannot afford to travel as much as they were able to afford, which really, leaves the owner with very little there to be able to fund and comply with these new regulations, but also to eventually be able to, what Anil said earlier on, how do we break even? What's going to be that magic formula, if at all, and how soon? Anil, did you want to add anything with regards to the imposing brand standards and whether this is something that the owner is able to pick up on in terms of funding it?
Yeah, well, the brand standards, I think Scott has said it. I think till we all break even, no owner is going to be happy on spending on FF&E and stuff like that. Let's face it. It's going to be a drip feed system till we start getting into the black, etc. So I'm very clear about that, and I'm really hoping that operators are going to be aligned to that. As far as funding, etc., goes, I've read reports and of the central bank in the UAE being very supportive on that, and they had instructed all the commercial banks to support industry, etc., including hospitality. It's not easy. It's not a pot that you can draw on unlimitedly. So you really need to get your own house in order to. Yes, there will be some support, and it will be up to a certain period. They've also waived certain fees, this, that, whatever. But at the end of the day, you'll have to manage your cash flow, yourself. I think that's important. as far as I think I was just thinking about this. What can the government do to help us? As I mentioned right at the beginning, the market size in each one of our countries, certainly UAE, internal travel is relatively small. If there was a way, and provided the COVID handling situation is similar in all the GCC, if the travel between the GCC then can be relaxed to a point where you just can get on a plane, show your resident visa wherever you land, and you're there. I mean, something so simple, provided, of course, the health side, they're all happy about it, that, that's taken care of. I mean, that will create a demand which we have not seen in the past, till we start looking at all the other parts of the world where it may be a little more complicated than our own home ground.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think you're talking about this travel corridor that, when we talk about local and domestic tourism, I mean, you said that earlier on, Anil. I mean, the UAE will not necessarily benefit from domestic tourism, whereas, KSA will definitely benefit from domestic tourism. And I would also like to hear from Hassan, specifically as it relates to the religious tourism sector in particular. But this morning, I read real quickly through the recent announcement that the UAE government has done with regards to travel in and out of the country and classifying countries by Group A, Group B, and Group C. Group C being you can't travel there, full stop. But even in the Group A, I was surprised to see that not all the GCC countries have been listed. So again, this is going to be dependent how soon. I mean, we all know this is changing by the day and by the week. So this might change next week. But again, as we speak today, we cannot necessarily plan recovery from the nearer segments or from within a shorter travel radius than what we would be hoping for. But that takes us nicely into discussing really the government support, because obviously we recognize, and we've done that very early on, I think now 3 months ago, when we look at the different government initiatives across the GCC, with the KSA and UAE definitely being much more behind supporting and providing stimulus packages to support the sector. Initially, that was rolled out for a 3-month period, I think. We have been talking about the need for support to be extended much longer. My personal view, as I said earlier on, would be 12 to 18 months. But Hassan, with our discussion, I understand, and I was also listening to the Minister of Tourism yesterday talking about how much the support that they have provided and continue to provide. Has this support been helpful? And what else do you think, in what form can they help you as owners in order to sustain until we start seeing some recovery, which again will probably be somewhere next year? And if we could also address the religious tourism and whether this is something that, my guess is it's not happening in July, but you can definitely tell us more about the Hajj period.
Absolutely, Halan. I'm really amazed by from day one, how the Saudi government reacted to this pandemic. They have launched numerous support to almost everybody, and particularly the private sector. This has made a complete turnaround, and from our conversation, you and me before, yes, it is material and on the ground as we speak. I think the first one is protection for employment. There was an amazing program where government really took at their charge almost 60% of all Saudi's employees to avoid corporations and companies to lay them off, and by a program called SANID, and have devoted for it, and it's already in action. Major companies who wanted to benefit from this have already applied, and it is ongoing. It's period for 3 months, and maybe there is a talk for extension for it as we speak. Another program for the expats sitting at home, they created a program called AHIC, which means if I have a certain potential or capacity of doing it, instead of staying at home, some other companies, they may need my expertise, and my company can lend me or put my name into the AHIC program, and I can go and assist the others. So this to keep us active and very proactive for this one. There are many other programs, other than the employment, which has been discussed or implemented here. It's from a monetary point of view. Actually, they eased on loan, they eased on interest. they eased on the custom duties, and most importantly from us as the operator, they eased on the utility bills, 30% reduction on the utility bills, and we've seen it on the bill itself. So these are really amazing, I would say, programs coming in. You mentioned earlier the announcement of His Excellency the Minister of Tourism last night. Again, this shows that we've been proactive, and there is an extremely, I would say, good potential for people after the lockdown. They wanna go out a little bit. So instead of going out randomly everywhere, there are programs encouraging, I would say, citizens in Saudi Arabia, whether they are expat or locals, okay, to go and follow and discover Saudi Arabia. I would just want to remind, before the pandemic, Saudi Arabia was discovering or unlocking different treasure and historical sites. Now, we've been talking about it for the last year, I would say. Now it is the right time for at least the citizen to go and visit. And as everybody would like to go on vacation, so there are too many staycations programs have been, I would say, listed and programmed. All the local DMCs have been involved with the support of ministries of putting programs and encouraging people as soon as the lockdown is completely open, which is as of next Sunday, people, whoever is planning to go for even short or long time term break, they can benefit from it. Back to the, I would say, the religious tourism. Yeah, we are coming to the Hajj season. There is no clarity on the Hajj season. Also, government is taking an extreme precautions to really make any visit to the holy mosque are completely safe, and it's happening and it's coming almost every day. Safety measures are implemented and tested as we speak. Not yet announced about opening Hajj completely or partially, so this is something else. Something we're waiting for it. Assume putting this aside, but there is a strong preparation for the Umrah season. Just to give the audience about the season in Saudi Arabia, particularly the holy cities, you speak about the Umrah season, which start from Wahid Muharram, okay, which is beginning of October, and it will end by, okay, they just be after Ramadan, okay, 15th of Shawwal, which is like nowadays. And then afterward, you have the Hajj season, which you go for the real pilgrims. So the preparation for the Umrah season is really up to speed. I think we will recover on the Umrah season by the back end of quarter 2020. So this is what is happening. For Hajj, we will know. We will wait and see situation. We won't expect Hajj to come exactly the same strength like prior years, but if it opens, it will definitely make a difference for us. And if it doesn't, okay, we are also prepared for it and be ready for the Umrah seasons.
Great, thank you, Hassan. It definitely does. I'm just going to ask Anil to talk about the government. Have they been helpful? I can see a lot of questions coming through, so I really want to try in the last 10 minutes to take the questions that have been asked, but some of these questions again relate to the government support. So as owners, Anil, would you describe these as being tangible? I mean, there were a number of waivers and incentives here in the UAE. How did you benefit as an owner? And there was a question specifically that relates to the refinancing or waivers from the banks. Have you had any experience there?
Well, it depends on each owner's situation, of course, whether they need that to go approach a bank, etc., for that particular subject. But from what I hear, and certainly in the market, having talked to a few friends, etc., yes, the government has shown that flexibility. What I hear is that they have, in their cases, agreed to defer the principal payments of this year for to be carried forward till at least the end of the year, and then obviously at the end of the year you have to really go back again and look at it again, and perhaps they were asked to keep servicing the interest so that there is a mutual arrangement there. This is what I hear from people. But for some people, it's not just about the refinancing. They're looking even beyond that. As you mentioned in your study, 75% of owners are saying they can only last up to 6 months. Frankly, you have to be a very, very smart owner, operator, to be able to get to break even and open at the end of even 6 months right now. This is 3 months have already gone.
Right.
So if you think that that's going to go into 18 months and 24 months, and then you expect, banks to not have any prepayments for the next 2 years, etc., then I suggest that you start looking at even other options, maybe.
Definitely, yeah.
Depend on individual to individual, your property, how focused you are in this industry, etc.
Scott, if I could come to you with the questions regarding the, obviously we're going to have owners talking to banks, owners talking to operators, owners having to let people go. This is reality. What are the sticky points? What are the few things that you want to leave with us and with the attendees?
Let me, if the lawyer can speak a little on the geopolitics. I mean, as Anil pointed out, the government assistance so far, these have been items to stop the bleeding. What we need now is items to create demand. Obviously, one is health and safety, making sure that guests are comfortable coming here. Maybe it's about time some of these petty differences among the GCC countries between Sunni, Shia, Qatar, Saudi, UAE, Iran, get over it. And, it's essential that we start opening up travel, health considerations aside, but getting over some of these self-inflicted wounds of the region. The other issue is in this region, unlike the UK, Germany, France, where 70, 80, 90% of tourism is domestically driven, I think it's just the opposite here, that what 20, 80% is long haul travel driven. How do you make that affordable? Maybe that's one of the government areas that it was what the Ryanair or EasyJet model was. They were arguing that at one point in time, you won't pay for our airfares because governments and businesses in the destination country will pay us to bring people here. Maybe that's another thing we need to visit. On the banking and employment, yes. I mean, this is not a very strong labor law country, regions. And I think for the most part, so far, both owners and operators have, with exceptions, done the right thing with struggling people who have no place, they have no funds and no place to go. Not even they can't go home if you do terminate them. And the rules I think that the government's put in place requiring housing are good. Not just, they may cost money, but if you don't do that, you won't have future employees when things go back to better. On the financing side, yes, you better look at your, obviously your covenants and your loans are probably out of whack. Your loan to values, debt service coverage, and you're going to have to talk with the banks on that. But so many people are in this situation. There's the old adage, you owe the bank $100, you have a problem. You owe the bank $1 million, the bank has a problem. And that's kind of the situation we're in today. The banks have all of their customers with big problems. So there is room for negotiation there.
Right, so we are going to have to start concluding here. And I'm looking at the questions. There's one in particular I want to pick, and perhaps I will comment on it, and then also ask you, Anil and Hassan, to comment. What does the panel believe will happen to room rates? Will they rise? Should they lower the prices or stay the same? And then there was another question that ties into ADR as well, with the upcoming supply that will slow down dramatically. So I would want to start off by saying, we've seen the highs and lows, and we, as much as we'd like to think that by reducing the rate, you're going to get people like, our traveler and guest confidence survey suggested that it's all about the confidence. It has nothing to do with whether you have a good rate. It's whether people are comfortable to travel and people are comfortable to stay. My view is by reducing the rate is not going to help owners necessarily build the occupancy, but also by increasing aggressively the rate will impact demand, because there are a lot of people that would have lost their jobs and have lost their income, and potentially there's this price elasticity there. Anil, what are your views specifically on rate strategy? And then Hassan.
You know, in this business, and we know this from the past also, when the occupancy falls beyond a point, right now it's fallen through the floor, so there is no point left. The rates will stay challenged for some time, okay? And the way I mean, you know, it's up to operators to decide where they will finally position their various brands, etc. But I suspect the gap between their various brands is going to be absolutely minimal for quite some time to come. I mean, that's reality. The idea would be everyone's going to work to how do I get to break even ASAP. That's the key here. Everybody wants the bleeding to stop, okay? So if in the UAE you have a very large inventory, you are bound to have rate pressures till that inventory gets somewhere into the 60s, at least, okay? The moment you start getting into the 60s, perhaps, you know, or maybe a little earlier, you might start achieving break even. Then you start tightening your fists a bit. I mean, this is typical business. There is no nuclear physics about it. We have seen some absolutely crazy things in the last 30 days itself, and some hotels came up with some rates which I almost hit my head and I said, oh my goodness me. But that was all temporary, I guess. You know,
Right.
some people press the panic button too soon. The advantage will, again, location will still come into play, and the better properties will finally come out of it faster than the others. And, you know,
We are all hoping so. Hassan, is there anything you'd like to add?
I just want to say one thing on the prices. I think my comments here are more a message rather than an opinion on. I think price war is not helpful at all. Okay, this is where we're not in a high demand area to start really going into a price war or trying to gain market share. For KSA, the average room rate is really reasonable. We are not sky high to say we can take a hit of 5, 10, 20% on it, with the exception of Jeddah, which is like the highest ADR in the world. But I would say for the rest of KSA, there is no room to play around with the ADR. And as was mentioned earlier, we need to break even in our hotel. So it will not come on the back of the ADR. More interestingly, I think, is we are now relying purely on rooms revenue. Okay, the restaurant revenue is nil anymore. So you do not have any other backup or other ancillary revenue to come and back up your ADR or your rooms revenue if you play with your ADR. So it is not an opinion, it's really a message. Do not play with your ADR at the end of the day. Just grab your market share without really harming the ADR average in the country.
Thank you. Scott, I would just want to conclude with the last question for you. Is there indication that government will pass legislation requirement minimum hygiene standards, in your opinion?
I hope so. I think this is a marketing opportunity. Singapore has just passed their own hotel cleanliness standards, and they come in and do certain things, and they put a stamp, a good housekeeping stamp on the hotel. I think that makes sense. Obviously, that must be coordinated between the owners, the operators, and having good science and planning. But you know, this country, as Anil pointed out, this has probably been one of the better places to be stuck in a pandemic. I'm much happier here than in the great Anglo-Saxon countries insofar as managing the pandemic. And when this government does things, it tends to do it right and get professionals to do it. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I know.
And I've also heard, yeah, just to add to this, I've also heard that here in the UAE, there are some initiatives, and definitely Iraq, TDA Iraqi was talking to me about some of their properties actually getting a stamp. So this may become actually a requirement, and then potentially they will be passing the law. We're just at the 1 o'clock mark, and I'm very conscious that people have been already with us for the last 1 hour. Unfortunately, we won't be able to touch on the future opportunities, although there are plenty, but hopefully we can come back together and have a discussion around where the opportunities are and how the recovery is looking like in the next couple of months. But I would like to thank all of you for taking the time, for being with us this afternoon. And I will wish you a good weekend, and stay safe and stay connected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hala, Anil, Scott, Hassan. I think that was a very frank and informative discussion that everyone would have gained a lot of insight from. Unfortunately, there seems to be a lot of pain and less on the gain side, but we'll get there. As everyone identified, the situation's evolving constantly, and things are changing day by day. So we at AHIC will continue to keep bringing people together and keeping you informed. We will have some exciting announcements in the coming weeks regarding our plans for AHIC, and also be reaching out to the AHIC delegates to inform them about what the future holds. Now, I would also recommend that you all check out griff.com/marketplace. On the 24th, we're hosting an event there that has a really informative roundtable with hotel F&B industry experts. I know that's a key discussion at the moment, and something that hotel owners and operators are really looking towards as people try and activate their F&B to capture some of the domestic dollar. So everyone, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your time. We'll be in touch with both the slides, a link to the full report, as well as a recording of the video. And as always, any questions, please feel free to reach out and drop me an email. Bye everyone, stay safe, and thank you again to our panel and Hala.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.